Deep Threat Sports Network, welcome back. We're back at it again, second time this week. We're hyped, we're excited. I'm excited because I'm going to talk to you guys about Heisman contenders. Who do I have? Who does Collin James have? And who does Bryant have? We're also going to talk to you guys about our top 25. Those are going to change. That's going to be some people that dropped off really hard. Some people moved up. Some people kind of sat where they were. So very exciting. But I'm going to go ahead and give you guys mine. My Heisman, my top three, my best players in the country at this moment. First and foremost, Cam Ward. You just can't knock him off after this week. He has just continued to play well and just crush it. And Miami's doing pretty good, so I think he's going to stay at the top for a long time. And then on the other hand, we've got Jackson Dart. Jackson Dart had a heck of a game against Georgia Southern, 382 yards, 4 touchdowns. Yes, 1 interception, but let's mention again, 382 yards in one game. So I think Jackson Dart's got a lot going for him. And then the one that everyone wants to talk about, Travis Hunter, and I think he's backing it up. He is going
The
up.
one that everyone wants to talk about you. Everyone or just David?
Hey, everyone wants to talk about how he's not a Heisman contender, but let me just tell you what he did. 130 yards, averaged about 18.6 yards on 7 receptions. And let's not talk about the game-winning forced fumble at the end of the game. I mean, if he doesn't force that fumble, Colorado doesn't win that game. And that's just flat out what it is. And that really goes back to how I talked about how Travis Hunter, I think, is the best player in the country. If he just had an offense, he just had a defense, I wouldn't even put him up there. No chance, no shot. But he is making plays on the defense. He's making plays on the offense on a very mediocre to bottom tier Colorado team. They're not a good team, and he's still making plays. He's still putting his name up there, and I think that's why he's my number 3. But, Collin, I will give you one thing. I am warming up to Ashton Jeanty. I have him as my honorable mention, and if it wasn't for Travis Hunter, he would probably be my number 3, truthfully, because I after last week, I said, okay, let me look at Ashton Jeanty. Let me look at what he's doing.
Hey, let me stop you where you're at. Ashton Jeanty and I don't want you to talk about Ashton Jeanty. All this shit talking you've done on Ashton Jeanty, since I started talking about him, we don't want you talking about him, Dave. Keep Ashton Jeanty out of your mouth. Just stay on Travis Hunter. Don't talk about this guy, all right? This is my guy. We don't need you over here on this side of the ship. But I'll let you finish what you're saying if you want to talk about how great he is. But don't talk about how he's on your list now. That's unacceptable.
Hey, listen, this is what I'm going to tell you. Ashton Jeanty is in my honorable mention simply because he continues to put up numbers. Again, we're not going to talk about the fact that Boise State's schedule is not nowhere near what anybody else's is. That's, a whole nother thing. But at the end of the day, they did play number 8 Oregon, and they had a close game with them. And he still put up good numbers. Again, they're not going to play, really anyone. I'm looking at the schedule now. I mean, Oregon State's about as crazy as it gets for them. So
I just know you owe me dinner or something because I think it was last week's episode. I think you kind of came across after I mentioned Jeanty and said he has 0% chance to win this Heisman Trophy. Now this guy's in your honorable mentions, Dave. Now he's in your honorable mentions.
Listen, he still has no chance. He won't win the Heisman. I will put anything on the fact that Ashton Jeanty does not win the Heisman, but I am giving him credit because he is putting up those numbers. I am putting him in the conversation because he put up the numbers, but he's not going to win it.
Good
I
save.
will put anything on it. But again, I do respect his numbers, and it's kind of hard to argue against them. If he continues to perform like this throughout the rest of the year, I think he's still going to be a Heisman talk, but he's not going to win. And that's better than nothing. You're being talked about as one of the top 3 players in the country. That is huge.
Absolutely. That was the case I was making last week. Just invite the guy. I think the guy at this point, as we sit, just gets invited. But I don't want to play spoiler too much. But yeah, I'm with you, Dave.
That's why I just want to know, Bryant, who do you have? Do you have Ashton Jeanty in there?
I put some serious thought into it, but I was pretty vanilla this week. I went with, the same picks I had last week. I didn't see anything that really changed my mind as far as moving anybody up or down. I think Cam Ward did enough against USF this week to keep in my number 1 spot. He had 404 yards and 3 touchdowns. Second, I got Jackson Dart, just like you do. He's got 1,554 yards in the season, 12 touchdowns. He also has 3 on the ground. He's almost 80% completion percentage. That's just insanity to me. And third, like I had last week, I got Jalen Milroe there. He had a bye week this past week, 590 yards, 8 touchdowns on the season, along with 6 on the ground and almost 200 yards rushing. Now, Jalen Milroe, this coming Saturday, has got a chance to either pull himself off my list or maybe move himself even maybe to the top. They got Georgia Bulldogs coming into town, college game day, prime time, the biggest stage of the week probably. We'll see what he can do. He generally plays good in big games. He's had a few in his career in the last season, including a few this season. So, like I said, he has a chance to move himself up, maybe into the top. We'll see. Or he also has a chance to completely move off of my list as well.
Bryant, this is the game right here where if your pick Jalen Milroe here does go out and win the Heisman this season, this is probably the game right here where we look back to and we talk about, hey, Jalen Milroe catapulted himself right to the front of this Heisman race right now in this Georgia football game. This is where it changed for him. This is where he became the favorite, et cetera, et cetera. I'm with you 100%. This is the game where he can make a massive statement, or to your point, we don't talk about him much from this point forward.
Totally agree. He doesn't really have to necessarily blow Georgia out to move himself up. If he has a solid game, like he typically does, I think that would move him up. I mean, Georgia's probably the best team in the country right now. So if he just goes in and tears it up like he's capable of doing, I think that's maybe solidify him at number one, not just with me, but maybe a lot of people across the country.
Yeah. Bryant, he just needs to take care of the football. Just take care of the football in this game. Like you said, don't try to play hero ball. Just take what the defense gives you, and don't be the reason you lost the football game. If you're not the reason that you lost this football game, your name will still be in contentions even if you guys do lose the game. Just don't be the reason you did lose the game. Correct.
Ryan, I got a question for you.
Yeah.
If Alabama shows up to Georgia, Alabama knocks out Georgia, because I truthfully, at the beginning of the year, I would have said no chance, but Georgia had a close game with Kentucky. We already saw how the Clemson game went for him, but now we're seeing how good Clemson actually is. So maybe Clemson just wasn't firing on all cylinders that first game. So I don't know how good Georgia is, truthfully. And I think this is going to show how good they are. So I think if Jalen Milroe goes and beats Alabama, because, realistically, if Jalen
Milroe beats Alabama, Jalen Milroe is
off the
list. On this list. He's going to be off the list.
Hear me out. If they show up and beat Georgia, even if he doesn't have an amazing game, I think he still has got to. He'll move into my top 3. He might even knock off Travis Hunter. And I don't know how far he'll move up on your list. Probably won't move up on Collins because Collin's stuck on Ashton Jeanty, but that's a whole other story. We ain't going to talk about that. So I think there's potential for Jalen Milroe to move up in the Heisman. And this is for him to – this is where he wins it. This is where he solidifies his spot, and this is where he moves forward from here.
Well, we've had somebody comment on this show before. This is the chance where Carson Beck can maybe get his name on one of our lists. You beat Alabama and you have a sound football game where you're not turning the ball over. You're taking what the defense is giving you. Literally the same thing we just said about Jalen Milroe for Carson Beck. I mean, Carson Beck has not looked great, especially since that viewer has left that comment for us. This has really played into our hands well. But I do expect Carson Beck at some point to kind of find his way in this Georgia Bulldogs team to really light up the scoreboard. So I think whichever team wins this football game, I think the starting quarterback of that team will probably be on at least 2 of our lists come next week, most likely.
So, Collin, we all want to know, who do you have in your top 3? We know there's Ashton Jeanty in there somewhere. Who else you got? What are the 2 you got?
Well, I'm going to probably fall in line with you guys here quite a bit. Cam Ward, my number 1, like you guys have already talked about. Had a great showing against USF with 404 yards, 3 touchdowns. Did have an interception. That's minor, though. The touchdowns outweighed the interceptions by a good margin. But on the season, he's going for 1,439 yards, 14 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. Tough to compete with that guy at the top. Number 2 is my favorite player in the country, Ashton Jeanty. They played Portland State this last weekend. He ran for 127 yards, stacking up 586 yards and 9 touchdowns on the season. The guy's an absolute horse. I don't need to say any more about him than what I already have. You guys should be a fan of him as well by now. My number 3 is Jackson Dart. Bryant has talked about him a little bit. Dave's talked about him a little bit. Had a great game this week. You know, he had 382 yards, 4 touchdowns. On the season, he's at 1,554 yards, 12 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. So Jackson Dart does round out my top 3. But this week, I'm going to feature an honorable mention pick. And my honorable mention pick is Caleb Johnson, the running back out of Iowa. This guy, I asked myself how I don't have him on my top 3, honestly. If I have Ashton Jeanty in my top 3, why is he not up there with it? And it's tough for me to answer this question. I think I give the nod to Jeanty because he had such a great performance against Oregon. He's averaging 171.3 yards per game. This is per game. On the season, he's got 684 yards and 9 touchdowns himself. So he's out marking Ashton Jeanty in yardage, even on touchdowns. And this last week, he had 21 carries for 206 yards and 3 touchdowns against a stout Minnesota defense.
Hey,
so Caleb Johnson might work his way up.
Hey, I'm going to go ahead and tell you one thing. What's the difference here, Collin? The difference is that Caleb Johnson plays real teams. They play real good teams.
Hey, I'm still going to stop you. Ashton Jeanty has still played the best opponent of anybody on our Heisman list. Don't come at me with that shit when you have Travis Hunter on your list, and they just about got beat. They should have got beat by Baylor, Dave. Stop.
Hey, shoulda, coulda, woulda.
They should have got beat by Baylor.
Woulda. When you look at it, Caleb Johnson's putting up the numbers and playing consistently good teams. Any team that Caleb Johnson has played will knock off anybody else that Ashton Jeanty has played other than Oregon. Just throwing it out there. They're not great teams, but they're a lot better quality teams than who Ashton Jeanty's playing.
All right, Dave, you want to talk about Caleb Johnson and Iowa's schedule being so tough and Ashton Jeanty's not being tough. Iowa has played Illinois State that is, for the love of God, Dave, Iowa State, Troy, and Minnesota. Ashton Jeanty, all I got to say is he played Oregon. None of those teams compete with Oregon resume-wise. So until you can get somebody to really bolster this resume and really have some stones to throw at Ashton Jeanty, I think you should stop while you're ahead, especially because you're talking about how he's moving into your honorable mentions. So you can miss me with this bullshit, Dave. You can miss me with it.
Hey, who's Portland State? Who is Portland State? Are they D2? Georgia Southern? Everyone's blowing Georgia Southern out.
I mean, hey,
the only other team that plays
he still played Oregon.
Yeah, one time.
I'm just going to keep talking about that. He still played Oregon. Portland State, I agree with you. Portland State almost did get Jeanty slid out of my Heisman list because he only had 127 yards in that game against Portland State.
Hey, my thing is the concept of them playing Oregon is the same concept of, hey, Mizzou blew out Murray State. Yeah, obviously.
But we still don't have Luther Burden or Brady Cook on this list, so they didn't do good enough.
Exactly. But, again, that's the great part about this, that we're all going to have differing opinions. You might agree with me. You might agree with Collin.
Listen, Boise State is making their way to this top 25 list. Not necessarily ours, but the AP top 25 list. They're around in that area, and that's solely because of Ashton Jeanty. Nothing else this team is really doing on the offensive side of the ball is outstanding or blowing people away. I truly think the Ashton Jeanty effect is why Boise State is having some success this football season.
Yeah, I think they have a really good chance of being one of the group of 5 teams to get in, and it's solely on his shoulders.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not because of Maddox Madsen, I think's his name, or whatever it is. I mean, it's solely because of Ashton Jeanty.
No, I agree. And I will give him that. Ashton Jeanty is the heart and soul of Boise State. But again, I do think that when they play a real team, let's say in the playoffs, it's all going to come crumbling down. Not because he's not good, but when all you got is Ashton Jeanty, most good teams are going to be able to just stop that. You know,
I agree with you 100%. I don't, and on record, I don't think they make the playoffs. I don't think they're not my group of 5 pick to make it. I just think they're a caliber team because of Ashton Jeanty.
No, absolutely. And again, that's what this Heisman talk brings up. We talk about how good is their schedules, how good are they playing against quality opponents, how are they just putting up numbers again against teams that are group of 5 teams. You know, what does that look like? So that's the exciting part, and that's why I love talking about it. And really, the best part is getting you fired up about Ashton Jeanty. So I'm hoping we get to the end of the year and he's not even a talk in there.
Well, so I do have a fun kind of question, a fun little exercise for us to do kind of off the cuffs here. None of us have done any homework on this. I just kind of want each one of us to pick a guy that we haven't really talked about that could probably work his way into this Heisman conversation moving forward. And we have tons of football left. So I want us all to kind of just off the cuffs here, rip a couple of guys that we haven't talked about to get into this list.
Hey, I'm going to go ahead and throw out our guy, Luther Burden. I think he's a quality player at a Mizzou team. And I hit on it last week, where if Brady Cook can sling the rock to him, I think he can make the catches. But again, you talked about it even earlier in this in our previous episode, Collin, that Brady Cook is playing very, very timid, just not making those intense passes. I mean, look at what he did on that last drive where Mizzou got the win. He sent a dime to Luther Burden, and he secured the ball. He won on the game. Do that more often. Get him more reps.
Get him the ball early and often. Get him the ball early and often. He'll work his way into this Heisman conversation just because of the skills he has with the ball in his hands. It is a bold take, but this is a good take. I like it, and that means Mizzou's really going to click if his name's brought up.
Mm-hmm. I think a sleeper guy that we don't really have. I have a couple actually. I think if Quinn Ewers comes back and gets healthy, I think he has a chance to pop in there. I know the Arch Manning hype and everything these past couple of weeks has kind of slowed that down a little bit. But I mean, he was the talk of the town 2 weeks ago. If he comes back healthy relatively soon, I believe, then I think he has a chance to definitely go in that conversation. Another person I want to bring up that didn't seem like a lot of people are really talking about, but I really do think Will Howard, Ohio State, also has a decent chance too. I mean, they're playing out of their minds on offense right now. Jeremiah Smith at wide receiver is absolutely electric. They are scoring points at ease. I think he has a chance of being pushed up in there too.
Well, you stole one of mine, Brian. I had three coming at you guys right here that kind of came to mind. Will Howard was one of those guys because I think if Ohio State is as successful as they're supposed to be the remaining of this season, that means Will Howard's done great things. You beat a Michigan team at that point. Then you beat a Penn State team. I think they played Penn State, so you beat a Penn State team at that point. So yeah, you've had some success, and he's done some great things at that point. My other two is I'm going to mention Nico. I don't think Nico's necessarily a sleeper, but with this remaining Tennessee football schedule and the teams that are on it, if Tennessee has a successful season, that means Nico, once again, kind of like the Will Howard effect. He's got to be great. So I think Nico and this Tennessee team are kind of coming off an Oklahoma game where they didn't necessarily perform like we were expecting them to, but Nico still did his job, averaging over 9 yards per completion. He's got tons of talent, and hey, he won the football game. So I'm going to kind of mention Nico here. I think we could probably bring him up down the stretch. And my last guy is kind of a sleeper. He may not ever get mentioned, but the way this offense is kind of humming right now and the way they look as a team, Drew Aller from Penn State, the quarterback at Penn State, I think, it's kind of a long shot here. If I was going to sprinkle somebody way down the list, I'm a firm believer in Penn State. I'm big on Penn State. I think Penn State could truly go undefeated. And if that's the case, once again, the quarterback gets most of the recognition. So I think Drew Aller could piece one together. I think he's got 8 touchdowns on the year already, north of 700 yards. They have a great rushing attack, great defense. So he does get overlooked a little bit. But yeah, if I'm going down the list, taking a flyer here, I'm going to go Drew Aller.
No, absolutely. And the big thing here is, and why we like to bring up like guys that we might have down the road is because we're not even halfway through the season yet. So injuries can happen, teams could fall apart, a number of things can happen. So although right now we might say, hey, Luther Burden might be a guy. If Mizzou starts to get a couple of losses, the team starts falling apart, they might fall apart. Again, Ashton Jeanty, if he gets, let's say he gets a little hamstring strain or something, that can slow him down. There's a lot that can happen here.
Well, I like talking about this too, because for me, I remember, back when I used to listen to shows before we kind of did our own thing here, I would be driving down the road and I would be in my head just begging for somebody to talk about guys that I have in my mind, So I'm hoping anybody that's out there kind of listening to us, maybe driving or working or whatever you're doing, listening to us, I hope maybe, Luther Burden was in the back of your mind or Drew Aller, Will Howard, Nico, any of those guys, Quinn Ewers coming back. I hope maybe we gave you the hunch just enough to go with your gut and go ahead and lock that in.
Well, now we're going to do a full 360. We started talking about the best players in the country. Now we're going to talk about the best teams in the country. And the best teams in the country don't necessarily have the best players in the country. Ashton Genty. But I'm just throwing it out there. So now we're going to go into our top 25, which is very different than the AP top 25, because this is what we think. This is based on eye test. This is based on wins and losses. If you get a win, we're going to move you up. If you get a loss, we're probably going to push you down. So we're going to punish you if you do bad. We're going to reward you if you do well. So every week we're starting from scratch. We're starting fresh. Right off the bat, we're going to talk about some honorable mentions. We've got Notre Dame, UCF, Indiana, Pitt, and Collin's ever favorite Boise State. Then we're going to hop into the
Hey, real quick, I'm just happy you even mentioned him on the honorable mentions. I thought for sure you weren't going to give him any credit here.
Hey, I'll give credit where it's due, when it's due. Next, we got Nebraska at number 25, Texas A&M at number 24, Washington State 23, Oklahoma State 22, Kansas State at 21. Oklahoma drops a couple spots into 19. But before we get there, we're not skipping number 20, USC. USC also dropped off. And then we have number 18, Louisville, 17, BYU, 16, Michigan, 15, LSU, 14, Illinois with that big win over Nebraska. Number 13, Clemson, again, another huge win against NC State. And then we're moving into Iowa State, Mizzou with a close game against Vanderbilt. Utah securing the bag against Oklahoma State, even without that starting quarterback. Penn State, Collin mentioned already, Drew Aller's doing some work over there. So great win for them. And then next we got Oregon at number 8, Alabama at number 7. Both teams had a bye, so they pretty much stayed in that same position for the most part. And then Ole Miss at number 6 with a win over Georgia Southern. Miami, number 5, big win against USF. Tennessee, as we all know, secured a bag against Oklahoma, sitting at number 4. Ohio State, number 3, playing really well as well. Bryant hitting on their quarterback as well, potential Heisman candidate. Georgia had a bye, so we kept them where they're at. And again, Texas 51-3 against UL Monroe. So we've got them at number 1. This can be real hard to knock them off. I think the biggest one here that I really want to talk about, for me, it's going to be Mizzou. I think Mizzou, and I hinted on it earlier, they drop out of the top 10 because I just don't think they have that talent. And if they do have the talent, they're not using that talent currently. So I think they do drop out of our top 10. But if they can get some quality wins, some good performances, they may move up there. But is there any team that you guys feel is at a good spot, or want to mention why they moved down, why they moved up?
Well, Mizzou, we had last week at 8. We slide them down to 11 here. I feel like that's due, man. We try to be the furthest thing from homers here. They had a really lackluster performance against a average at best, you could say, opponent. I mean, I'm pretty sure Vandy had just lost to Georgia Southern the week before, Georgia State, somebody like that. Mm-hmm. Not a good performance by Vandy there. You know, Vandy came into this game 3-0 with the win against Virginia Tech, who a team that we had some belief in. Then we're talking something different here in this Mizzou team. You beat an undefeated team, that could be a big win. But yeah, man, Vandy, not a great team. So we slid them down. I feel like that was due.
I think a pretty cool team to see, or a team that, you know, proved it last week, is BYU. They went from unranked to 17th in our rankings here. They had total domination over K-State. K-State we had at, what did we have them at last week? We had them at 12. An unranked team in our rankings beating a 12-ranked team gives you a big catapult up in our rankings, and they look dominant doing it, like we talked about last episode in our game film session. So that's the game, or the team that stands out to me here in our rankings.
Did anybody in the world think that Illinois could get themselves on a top 25 list this year? And we talked about this in the film session episode as well. I mean, enjoy it while you can, Illinois fans, because the schedule ahead is just absolutely brutal. So buckle up and enjoy this while you can. But fellas, I want to give them credit because they have looked so good thus far, and that is awesome. I love seeing new teams in the top 25, Brian. I'm glad you talked about BYU. You know, we have another unranked team finding their way into our rankings. Washington State. You know, Washington State currently sitting at 4-0, coming off an absolute shootout against San Jose State. But John Mateer, quarterback, this Washington State team, man, they look pretty good. I mean, they're making some noise out there on the West Coast in the Pac-12 with just two teams called Pac-2, the two-pack. But I mean, hey, they look good, man, and that's awesome for them.
Boys, I got a question. Who do you guys see being our first two-loss team in the top 25? Is there any team that you're kind of leaning towards? I mean, because we're now getting to where half of this list has lost. So a lot of these teams are playing good competitors week in and week out. So there's going to be a two-loss team. If it's not this week, it's going to be next week.
That's a great question, Dave. Off the cuffs here, I don't think I have that answer for you right off the cuffs, but we talk about these teams adding losses and where do they go from here. I don't know off the top of my head what Michigan's remaining schedule looks like, but you have a Michigan team that has a top 5 loss on the season playing at Texas, I believe, if I remember correctly. And then maybe they lose that Ohio State game. I know that's later in the season, so we'll definitely have a 2-loss team on this list before then. But I mean, just coming to mind real quick, I mean, Michigan's a team that has a couple of respectable losses if that's the case. We have Notre Dame sitting outside in our honorable mentions. And the reason I talk about that, Dave, is you're asking this 2-loss question thing. Every other outlet we kind of look at has Notre Dame sliding back into that top 25. The reason DTSN is not moving Notre Dame into their top 25 is because of that loss to Northern Illinois. And hey, that loss to Northern Illinois gets that much worse because Northern Illinois just lost to Buffalo, a team that is getting shellacked by good football teams. Northern Illinois loses to them. That makes that loss look even worse for Notre Dame. And Notre Dame's win this last week also wasn't that impressive, in my opinion. Congratulations, you won the game, but you didn't overwhelm me to get you back in this list after having a Northern Illinois loss on the resume.
Yeah, Collin, I agree. I think it's hard to tell as far as if we'd have a 2-loss team at this point, just because I think if any of these 1-loss teams you see here on our rankings now were to lose, I think they would drop out. We'll see. There's some good games coming up in October where I think a team up in the top may lose or something along those lines where I think they still have a valid enough resume to stick in our rankings. I think it's tough to tell. I think time will tell on that one.
Well, there is such thing as good losses. We've talked about that here before. There is good losses. Now, when you lose that game, we classify a good loss if you're losing to another top 25 opponent. You're most likely going to be on the road against that top 25 opponent, and you keep it respectable. So that's kind of what we classify as a good loss here. Now, Dave, with these 2 losses, we have a lot of teams with this 1 loss that I feel like Brian said, when they lose their next game, they're going to slide out because we still have undefeated teams sitting in our honorable mentions. We have a UCF undefeated team, a Pitt undefeated team, an Indiana undefeated football team. We need to see just a little bit more to say that, hey, yeah, these guys are really a top 25 team. But I think an undefeated Pitt or an undefeated UCF or an undefeated Indiana will definitely slide up in the rankings, in my opinion, over, let's say a 2-loss Nebraska or a 2-loss Oklahoma. I mean, I'm going to give credit with the wins and not the losses.
Well, let me ask you, because the reason why I asked this question is because there was one game in particular that I was really like, how's this going to go? So we've got, I don't know if you guys have looked at next week's schedules yet, but we've got Illinois playing Penn State. If Illinois knocks off Penn State, I think they both still stay top 25 because Illinois has proven that they can win against good opponents. And if Penn State wins, they were kind of expected to win. And I don't think that we necessarily drop Illinois off the top 25 because they lost to a Penn State, which we've already talked that they've got things going in a good direction there. So I think whatever way that game goes, they're both going to stay in the top 25. Obviously,
I think they'll both, whoever loses would still only have 1 loss. So I still kind of think that solidifies into your point in our list. I just don't know how we can make a stance for anybody with 2 losses up to this point. And I was already thinking about that question that you just asked, not necessarily the question, but having thoughts like that in my head before we even got to that point, because I was asking myself, what does a 2-loss Michigan look like on rankings? If they would have lost to USC and have a loss to Texas, what does that really look like? Because you can't convince me that a 2-loss Michigan is still, or sorry, not still, but is worse than an undefeated Pitt. I still think Michigan kicks Pitt's ass up and down the field. So I was kind of figuring out in my head, what would that look like? I don't know, boys. you guys can probably talk me into some things, but I feel like I'm a stickler on the losses here. I just don't want to give credit to teams that lose football games.
No,
I'm gonna go ahead and throw out a hot take here.
I've been waiting on this. I love hot takes. We haven't had a hot take all episode, so we might as well get one going.
I think Auburn goes into Oklahoma and knocks them off, and Oklahoma falls out of top 25. I did not like Oklahoma, how they played whatsoever. Clearly, they got a problem at the quarterback position, and that is never good.
Have you seen Auburn's quarterback position?
Yeah, exactly. So
buddy, you got one on the phone on the sideline supposedly, and then Peyton Thorne comes back in, and that's your best option. Jesus
4 picks.
Christ.
Exactly, and that's what.
Yeah,
it's gonna be an ugly game, I think.
Is that game in Auburn?
That game is in Auburn. That is in Auburn. So I think
you might be onto something, Dave.
And you know, that's why it's a hot take, because there's a lot lower chance of it happening. But I think if there's one game that might happen, it might be this one, because Oklahoma's they got a loss. They, the quarterback position is, kind of in shambles. Their offense isn't really, firing like they want it to. And if Auburn can find a way to pull off like a BYU and just not play a great game, but just take advantage of turnovers, they're able to get a couple scores. They're able to stop Oklahoma, which Oklahoma clearly doesn't have a whole lot offensively going. They may be able to win a close game here.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a hot take. But sorry to cut you off, Collin. But
no, go ahead, buddy.
Those are two teams that are definitely struggling at this point in the season, but I would much rather play a struggling team at my home field. And we all know that Auburn is a tough place to play in the country. So you might be onto something, Dave. Like Collin said, that's definitely a hot take. I think it's unlikely, but you never know.
I tell you what, though, it's not as hot as it initially sounds if you really think about it. I mean, Oklahoma has done nothing either to impress us at all this whole season. Period. They were in a dogfight against Houston, if I remember correctly. So I mean, yeah, Dave, I may ride with you on this. The more I think about it, the more I like it. Auburn is a tough place to play. And Oklahoma, that game is this coming weekend, right? You said?
Yeah. Looks like it is this
weekend. I haven't looked at anything yet on this football game. But I'm gonna take the under. I can tell you that right now. I don't think either team moves the ball. So we're gonna like the under in that game most likely. But yeah, you're not going to see any good quarterback play in that football game at all.
One thing that really had my mind going that way was because Brent Venables already made a decision that Michael Hawkins is starting at quarterback.
So, he named it. He named him starting quarterback.
Yep.
I thought he said they were competing. He already named him the starter.
That's the last thing I saw. I'll have to double check, but I'm pretty sure about an hour ago, Brent Venables. Yeah, Brent Venables has him being the starting quarterback. I mean, listen, I respect it, but I would have started Jackson Arnold. Give him another shot. See, because you don't want to kill his
you mailed this team in for Jackson Arnold. You built this team for Jackson Arnold, around Jackson Arnold. I just think it was a tough game for Jackson. I'm more inclined to agree with you on the Auburn take for sure now. Like I said, not that Peyton Thorne's good, because he's not, dear God, but yeah, I guess the home field effect is why I'm going to ride on this one. And Oklahoma has 0. And when I say 0, I mean 0 run game. 0 run game to take the pressure off the quarterback. So,
and they can't sleep the run.
No, I mean, you pulled 2 cats out of your hat already this season and naming Texas the #1 team in the country before anybody else did. Mentioning Travis Hunter being on your Heisman list before anybody else did. Hey, maybe you're just early to the Auburn upsetting Oklahoma this time. Hey, real quick while we're talking about that, I'm going to ask Bryant this question. Bryant, Oklahoma loses this game to Auburn. There's no spot for Oklahoma in the top 25, correct? That'll be our 2-loss team. I'm just giving us an example.
Absolutely not. I know that they're playing on the road, but Auburn has losses to Cal and Arkansas on their resume this season. So, no. I mean, if they lose to Auburn, I don't even think they're even close to the top 40, probably.
Hey, I'm with you, dude. I'm serious. Oklahoma's defense has looked good, but that's the only thing you can say about this football team. And when have you ever rode on Oklahoma's defense versus their offense?
Yeah, exactly. And they barely beat Houston, and they barely beat Tulane. too. So I mean, it's not like they've been blowing everybody out before Tennessee. So
They
have
only
a
won
lot
those
of
games because they had more talent.
exactly.
And I think they have more talent than Auburn right now. I mean, Auburn's
Yep.
recruiting classes going forward are nuts. But right now, as it sits, they have more talent than Auburn. But Auburn's talented enough where they can't just out-talent Auburn. If that makes any sense, the point I'm trying to get at is you're not just going to go into Auburn and chalk up a win after playing like shit like you did against Tulane and Houston. It's not going to happen at Auburn.
Yeah, this is definitely no cakewalk. Oklahoma, I think in years past can kind of walk into opponents' places to play in the Big 12 and kind of just sleepwalk through a game. You can't do that in the SEC, no matter who it is. Obviously, we saw Mizzou kind of do that with Vandy this past week. So Dave might be onto something here.
A question that I have for us to kind of shift gears to a different team here. Are we too low on Louisville? I find it so hard to fall in love with Louisville and shoot them up this list. Are we too low on them, though? I mean, should they be above BYU? Should they be above Michigan? Should they be above LSU? Should they be above Clemson? Hell, Clemson and LSU, or sorry, Clemson and Louisville are in the same conference. They're so hard for me to judge.
For me personally, it's going to take for them to do something special against Notre Dame because they've played Austin Peay, they played Jackson State, they played Georgia Tech. They really haven't played anybody. Yes, they're 3-0, but they're not quality wins. And I think if they want to be a top 25, they've got to do something with Notre Dame. They've got to beat them, and they've got to it can't be a close game. It's got to be at least a score or more that they beat Notre Dame by. And then that'll just push Notre Dame.
Where's that game at?
That's in South Bend.
Yeah, so that's the South Bend this weekend.
Yeah, Louisville wins that game at Notre Dame, and they go 4-0 after that game. Then, yeah, I think I have to have the conversation amongst the three of us where does Louisville slot in the top 12? Are they looking like a playoff caliber team? Because for me and to you guys, I feel like we kind of have the same approach on this. We look at this top 12, and I think those are 12 teams that are playoff caliber teams. Now, it's not going to shake out like that due to conferences, and only so many teams are going to be from each conference. But I look at the top 12, and I think those are 12 playoff caliber teams. And I kind of expand that a little bit to Clemson, judged off what we've seen from Clemson here in the last couple weeks. But yeah, I mean, Louisville wins that game. They got to be a playoff caliber team, right? I know Notre Dame's not in our top 25, but South Bend's no easy place to play. And you add that to the resume after being 3-0, and you kind of got something going.
I agree. I think we have them right where they need to be at 18. Like Dave said, they haven't really played a whole lot of quality teams. Yeah, Georgia Tech was probably their best win, but I mean, Georgia Tech's best win is probably Florida State, and that is not a game like it's not as big as it seemed like it was in week 1. So I think they're right where they need to be. They're playing good football. Obviously, I don't think we had as much faith as them in them this past week. I mean, a lot of us picked Georgia Tech to cover that game. So I think they're right where they need to be. They have a chance to prove themselves moving forward, especially this weekend against Notre Dame.
I agree. So what do you guys think about LSU? We have LSU at 15. We slide them 5 spots up. They are our second highest rated team with a loss. Let me make that clear. The second highest ranked team with a loss behind Clemson. What do you guys think about them? I mean, can they rally around? I know last episode we talked about how Harold Perkins, their defensive captain, the face of the defense when the defense doesn't have much of a face to begin with, out for the season. I think they probably start sliding downward on this list moving forward. But I'm just curious as to what you guys think of them so far.
I think so far, I think it's a reasonable spot that we have them sitting at, just with their losses, with their wins, and then. But you kind of hit the nail on the head, Collin. I think they're going to fall off. I mean, they play South Alabama next weekend. Then their next game after that is Ole Miss, and then they've got some quality problems. They got Alabama. They've got Texas A&M. Arkansas can create some issues, and then they're
man, do not sleep on that Arkansas offense.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, they are going to give this LSU defense fits.
Yeah, they have the leading rusher in the SEC right now.
Exactly.
Jaquindon Jackson, right?
Yes, sir.
Ooh, that dude is a problem. An absolute problem for opposing defenses. Good luck. LSU's not stopping that without Harold Perkins. That's for damn sure. With that, their defense is atrocious. We know this, but their offense does operate at a high clip. And we talked earlier about some Heismans that can maybe get in the mix. None of us shouted out Garrett Nussmeier, so I'm gonna do it right now. 1,247 yards, 13 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. He's doing it, fellas. I mean, he's humming, and he's kind of humming in silence right now compared to what everybody else is doing and how everybody else is being brought up in headlines. Did Kyron Lacy? I know he took a shot in this game. I kind of ventured off to other games because LSU kind of seemed to make it like they were going to handle UCLA, and they did. Did he come back? Is he okay? Is he going to be here this next game? I mean, I didn't see. I just didn't know if either one of you guys saw as well, if he's all good or not.
Doesn't appear. I don't see anything, that jumps off the table here that he's not going to come back for next week. So unless there's something I'm missing, I think he'll be okay. Might have just been shaken up.
Well, it looks like Kyron Lacy's good going forward, and that's huge for this LSU offense and Garrett Nussmeier too, especially because the run game's kind of taken a hit with some injuries throughout the season. But I guess, before we kind of move on or get out of here, is there any other teams you guys want to talk about? Anybody in the top 10 we kind of want to talk about here? We kind of steer away from the top 10 so much because it's so chalky and these teams are just kind of taking care of business. Let's focus on somebody in the top 10 here that maybe we think could slide out moving forward and isn't necessarily a playoff team for us down the stretch.
I think, this week we're going to obviously see some movement with Georgia playing Alabama, but I think we'll talk about that game enough later on in the week. Personally, I think the team that, could struggle down the stretch maybe here and may slide out of this top 10 is maybe Oregon. Oregon's no longer in the Pac-12 where they're going to have a lot of long travel schedules, colder games than they're probably used to. They may not be in an environment that they're not used to playing some of these Big Ten stadiums. They haven't really been crazy impressive this season. So I think that's probably an outlier in the top 10, at least from what I'm seeing, that could possibly slide out in the future, especially with them playing different teams that they don't really have any history with in the Big Ten.
Dylan Gabriel has to take off. He's going to have to start doing spectacular things at the quarterback position. And by spectacular things, I mean getting the ball to Evan Stewart and Tez Johnson. Get those guys the ball, man. We talked about Luther Burden quite a bit on this show. They are Luther Burden-esque. Get them the ball. When the ball's in their hands, they make guys miss. They develop points on their own. They get you in scoring position on their own. Just give them the ball. Get plays developed where those guys get the ball early, often. And you'll notice that Oregon probably starts to click a little bit better. The team I want to talk about a little bit in this top 10 is Utah. I think Utah slides out of this top 10, no questions asked down the stretch. That defense is stout. That offense is not, especially without Cam Rising. I do think Kyle Whittingham's a great coach, probably the best coach in the Big 12 as it sits. But I'm gonna make a bold take here. I'm gonna throw my hot take out. I haven't thrown one of these out in a while. I was a firm believer in Kansas State and Oklahoma State. The Big 12 is tons of fun. It's the People's Conference because it's so wide open. It's so all over the place. A team that nobody's talking about, Iowa State. I think Iowa State can make their way towards the top of this. I don't want to say top 10, but I think they can make their way to the 10, 11, 12 range, stay there comfortably through the remaining of the season, arguably go win the Big 12. Because I think, like I said, the Big 12 is wide open. No team is really blowing my socks off. I think Iowa State can do this thing, man. And I really do think the ACC and the Big 12 are kind of solidifying that the SEC and the Big 10 are going to load up this playoff bracket. I don't think ACC or Big 12 gets any more than one team from this point forward into the playoffs. I don't think they've impressed enough outside of Miami and outside of whoever ends up winning this Big 12 conference. I think it's just those two teams that go, and the SEC and Big 10 take full advantage of that.
No, I agree. I think we'll definitely talk about it enough down the range of the season, especially when some of these college football playoff rankings come out. But I agree. I think it's going to be heavy Big Ten, heavy SEC, with pretty much only the automatic bids from the ACC and the Big 12 likely getting.
Yeah, I feel the same way.
No, I'm with you guys, and I think, truthfully, I think that's something that we kind of knew going into this, just looking at how the playoffs are set. Bryant hit the nail on the head of probably just going to be that front runner for ACC run for Big 12. I don't know. We'll see how it does end up panning out. I mean, there's a lot of teams that we expect great things from, and they're starting to fall apart at this point. Oregon was supposed to be one of those top 5 teams, not panning out. Then we also have Tennessee that is making a huge leap. So,
but hey, on the other side of that, though, there's tons of football left. I mean, there's tons of football games left for Oregon to prove to us again. They were just kind of playing with their food, and they are a top 5 team. So we have tons of time left. That's the great thing about college football here is a lot can still shake out. Yeah. Before we get out of here, too, is there anybody else you guys want to talk about? Any team that you think we should give some credit to that's not in the top 25? Any team that's, we just are really confident moving forward? They're kind of going to disappear off this list and not be heard from again. And real quick, I think mine's probably Illinois. That's why I love where they're at right here, getting into that 14 spot. But I do look for them to disappear. So I don't know if you guys have anything, just any more chit chat, anything else going on about college football. Hey, we could talk college football all night, fellas.
No, I mean, you guys are going to hear every bit from me. I'm going to tell you whether it's good, bad, controversial. I'm going to let you know. I'm going to throw it out there. So I pretty much am an open book every episode.
No, I think I'm good. I think we covered this past week well. I'm excited for this upcoming week and see we're starting to get into the part of the season where games matter more, especially now with the 12-team playoff. Fan bases are going to start getting more angry or happier or, in between somewhere. So excited to see what the rest of the season brings.
Hey, if you're anything like me, I'm only getting angrier as a Mizzou fan. Like I had said previously, my couch took an absolute beating. I think I put my couch in a coma. And it's not going to be the last coma that couch goes in this season. I can tell you that, especially based on how things have gone. But yeah, fellas, tons of fun. Like we said before, hey, like, subscribe, comment. We want comments. We want you guys to comment and tell us everything good, bad, or otherwise. That gives us talking points. Well, you leave us a comment, I promise you we will get to your comment. We will absolutely address it. We will make a stance on it, whether you want it to go our way or your way. We'll let you know. But hey, like, subscribe, stay with us. We have more episodes coming to you this week. We have a game breakdown following up later in this week going into week 5. Fellas, this has been a lot of fun. Until next time, though, peace.